The Far East and the Deep South by Logan Nicholas Carver. Prologue. Somewhere in Louisiana. For centuries, alligators have ruled the bayou. A new apex predator has taken over recently. At night, when the fog lifts from the water's surface and the destination is in plain sight, boaters make their way down the river and fixate their eyes on an illuminated shack standing alone in an otherwise uninhabited landscape. These daily travelers ponder the mystery of its establishment. The shelter seemingly materialized overnight, while the aging dock before the structure has been worn down and weathered by time. Dark silhouettes project through the covered windows of the home like ghosts. Passerby speculate about who or what resides behind its hollow walls. It's in there where he lives. No one in town saw it coming, but a mysterious man from the Far East came to live in the Deep South. Isolated from the past and the present, he lives alone near the riverbank. A few months ago, some curious locals who crossed paths with the foreigner began to speculate about his presence in the swamp. 3 men from the town concerned with his whereabouts made the mistake of following him home one evening. They have not been seen since. Chapter 1. Prime. The catch of the day was bass, fresh from the river. Wren gutted and prepared the fish for an early breakfast. Although he would never admit it, Wren knew inside he was a competent hunter. He possessed the necessary skills when it came to gathering food. Therefore, he could survive on eating fish alone. Having been raised from a fisherman, Wren had gained much experience from his father growing up. His favorite thing about cooking was watching the fish flop in the skillet as if it were still struggling for life. He couldn't help but laugh at every uncanny movement. When he first arrived in the area, he was indifferent to the taste of the fish from the bayou. In Japan, the fish were far fresher and better tasting, being right off the coast. It took some time for Wren to get used to, but he hardly had a choice after all. The river supply was his main source of protein, and it ensured his daily survival. Learning to adapt wasn't always as easy as he imagined in his head. Every morning, Wren would wake up and go to the river. Then he would enter waist-deep into the murky waters and throw out a net to catch enough fish for the whole day. He wouldn't leave until he had at least 3 good ones. Never did he forget to thank the river for supplying his food. Wren made sure to say a silent prayer before each meal. For him, it was not only a sign of respect, but a responsibility to show gratitude for nature's offerings. Crouching to the floor, Wren was enticed by the rich smell of the steaming bass. Eager to take a bite, he hesitated for a second. His attention turned towards a candle he had placed on the mat, which he kneeled upon. Wren's eyes focused on the center of the flame as he inhaled and exhaled precise, sharp breaths. A flicker from the flame made him alert. Wren became completely aware of his surroundings. He could hear every drop of dew in the bayou. The air around him suddenly became louder than the most violent of winds. Even the smallest creatures became audible around him. Wren could hear the beetles crawl and the crickets dance in a playful way. Listening carefully, the foreigner waited for the sound of oncoming footsteps. He gave it a minute. A loud splash from the river shook the house a little. Nature was at work. It's probably just a gator or a large bird, Wren thought. No one dared to approach the shack. It was a false alarm. There was no sign of human activity. For the time being, everything was as peaceful as Zen. When Wren first arrived in the U.S. about a year ago, he found himself in desperate need of a place to live. He had been homeless for some time, wandering the streets and rummaging for food. It didn't take long for Wren to realize he wasn't getting anywhere by begging. He had to earn his place in society. Most of his days were spent in the city of New Orleans. There were many entertainers and artists on the street looking to make a quick buck. Ren saw this as an opportunity to make some money. Building upon his experience with kanji writing, he quickly developed a business out of Japanese calligraphy paintings. From many years of practice and schooling as a child, Ren became a gifted artist over time. He always had admired the art of his language, not only the verbal aspect of it, but the visual aspect as well. Thus, he took his talent to the streets. Ren performed live acts in which he would paint intricate black symbols onto white canvases. It didn't take a whole lot of talent to amaze the crowds, so the overpriced paintings were an easy sell. Ren also saw it as a good time to practice his English. Attempting to speak fluently, however, was something he had yet to master. Although there was no disguising his accent, he learned to speak just enough English to get by, something which other minorities he observed had struggled with also. Admittedly, Ren knew his people were inherently driven by the desire to improve one's individual self, sometimes even to a fault. He saw his own culture and upbringing as the sole reason for his desire to succeed. Whether or not his thinking was an already well-established stereotype, Ren could care less. He was his own man. After his days as a street entertainer, Ren sought to settle down somewhere outside of New Orleans. He began to explore the backwoods of Louisiana to seek out a remote and hidden location. Ren had always felt like an outsider, even in Japan, but here in America, he was a gaijin, or a foreigner. There seemed to be an endless sense of satisfaction in doing things his way, and Ren relished in that notion. Wandering alone in the bayou made him feel no different. He was free to do whatever he wanted. Ren would often talk to himself, for there was no one else to talk to. Despite this, he never got lonely. He was content with being on his own. Heck, I could build myself a place right here. Nobody would be able to find me, Ren muttered. On one of his long treks through the swamp, Ren found an old abandoned dock by the riverbank. He had been searching all day for a suitable spot that he could claim for himself. Ren went up to the dock to examine it closer. He then tested its sturdiness by walking back and forth several times. Some of the wooden planks were cracked and broken, but the rest of it held up just fine. After a thorough search of the area, Ren stopped to think. From the end of the dock, he looked up to the land. The terrain was high enough to avoid floods. He thought of this as a fitting foundation for a home. He walked hundreds of miles to and from the hardware store to get the materials he needed to construct a sustainable home. Building tools, wood supply, windows, and tin roofing, among other things. Within a week, Ren single-handedly built himself a shelter. It was hard work, but once it was finished, it looked like it had been there all along, as if it were meant to be. It wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. The day is young. There is still time, Ren thought to himself. He knew the authorities would be looking for him soon. It was only a matter of time before his location was found. Holding on to his Eastern values, Ren maintained his intolerance towards the American mindset. He felt a great sense of duty and honor to his homeland. It was in his blood after all. Ren's home was scant. He only had the things he needed to survive, just the essentials. There were the typical home appliances you would find in a small hotel room, a bathroom, small kitchen, and closet that shared the same open space with a single bedroom. However, tables and chairs were absent inside. As a man of meditation and reflection, Ren found comfort in using a mat for all of his meals, workouts, and breathing exercises. His lifestyle was indeed simple, and he carried it with him wherever he went. Ren was always on the run, but unlike most people, he lived for the chase. As a matter of fact, he indulged in it. Washing his face in the bathroom sink with warm water, Ren stared at his reflection in the mirror intensely. Every morning, Ren was reminded of his past life from the tattoos that covered his skin. The image of a skeletal samurai mask surrounded by cherry blossoms covered the entirety of his backside and forearms. It was a beautiful work of art. For Ren, it was more sentimental than anything, for it reminded him of his mother. Wiping the water from his brow, Ren managed a reluctant smile. Those pigs are out there, right now, looking for me. I'm a wanted man now. Time to go, the foreigner said in a serious voice. He was in a messy situation, and he had to find a way out of it.